I stopped counting the years when my voice stopped mattering. In my family, silence wasn't peace, it was obedience. Every time I tried to explain myself, they smiled that practiced smile that said, "You've already said enough." I kept showing up anyway, birthdays, holidays, funerals, pretending it didn't sting when they spoke over me. When my name became something to whisper, not to honor, I told myself they just didn't understand. That if I stayed calm, stayed kind, one day they would see who I really was. They never did. And last night, at my sister's wedding, I finally realized they never will. Her laughter cut through me, sharper than any insult could. It wasn't new. It was just the moment I stopped mistaking cruelty for misunderstanding. So I smiled, lifted my glass, and said nothing. But something inside me shifted for good. They still think I'm the quiet one. They have no idea how loud my silence is about to get. 5 years had passed since I'd learned how to live with silence. The kind that didn't demand answers or apologies, just the slow rhythm of the sea outside my window. My days followed the tide, the smell of coffee at dawn, the scratch of Valor's paws against the porch, the radio whispering weather reports that never mentioned people like me. That morning, the mail truck stopped at the edge of the gravel road. The driver waved, holding out a thick ivory envelope edged in gold. I tore it open, half expecting a bill, maybe a form I'd forgotten to sign. Instead, elegant letters curled across the page. Catherine Ann Morgan and Mark Elliott. My fingers froze. The room went very still, like the air before a storm. I hadn't seen that name in 17 years, not since the night I dragged him out of concrete and dust while the world burned behind us. He'd looked at me once, grateful, shaken, and promised something neither of us said aloud. Then he disappeared. And now, he was marrying my sister. I read the invitation again, slower this time, until my eyes caught the handwriting beneath the print. A note, slanted and familiar. "Behave yourself." 3 words from my mother. 3 words that carried a decade of distance. I set the invitation on the table beside a tarnished metal. Outside, the sea kept its rhythm, steady, unbothered. I finished my coffee, tasting salt instead of sugar, and knew I would go. Not to belong, not to forgive, but because being erased in silence was worse than walking straight into the noise. I left Maine before dawn, when the fog still blurred the line between sea and sky. The highway was nearly empty, every mile a slow unwrapping of memories I had tried to seal shut. The radio crackled, a storm moving toward Chesapeake Bay. I smiled to myself. The storm had been waiting for me for 17 years, crossing into New Hampshire. My phone rang. My mother's voice arrived cool and polished, like glass. She didn't ask how I'd been. She told me not to drag the past to the wedding. Catherine had important guests. She said, "Don't make things uncomfortable." I could hear what she meant beneath her words. "Don't bring yourself—" I hung up before she could finish. Her voice still echoed in my head. Silence is the only kind of respect people remember. By nightfall, I stopped at a deserted gas station. The neon light flickered weakly against the rain. I opened the trunk and touched the old leather case. Inside lay my uniform, folded and waiting. My fingertips brushed the rough fabric, and I heard the wind moan through the metal roof, like a voice from another life saying, "Don't let them define you." When I reached Ridge Harbor, the house stood as if time had polished it too much. White walls, trimmed hedges, not a leaf out of place. The maid opened the door and greeted me as Miss Morgan. The title I'd earned had vanished, the same way my place in that house had. The smell of lemons hit me first, my mother's trademark, sharp enough to burn away anything real. My father's portrait hung centered above the mantel, all medals and posture. Mine was gone. A faint square on the wallpaper marked where it used to hang. On the coffee table lay an old newspaper. Colonel Morgan under investigation for misconduct in Iraq. Beside the headline, penciled in my mother's handwriting, "At least she learned." The door opened behind me. She appeared in the mirror, adjusting her collar, her reflection tidier than she was. "You came after all," she said. "You remembered I existed." I wanted to answer, but instead I said, "You sound surprised." She smiled that thin, careful smile. "There'll be many people at the wedding. Try to keep it appropriate." I swallowed the bitterness and said evenly, "Don't worry. I already know the part I'm supposed to play." She hesitated for half a breath, then reached for the lemon spray and filled the silence with the scent of denial. The night before the wedding, the house glowed like a magazine spread. Candles, crystal, a table too long for warmth. My seat was at the far end, beside the kitchen door. From there, I could see everything: the perfect smiles, the polite laughter, the family I used to belong to. Catherine shone at the head of the table. "So glad you could come," she said brightly. "Early retirement must have its perks." A ripple of laughter followed. I let it pass. "Sometimes retirement isn't failure," I said. "Sometimes it's survival." The air turned thin. My mother cut in smoothly. "Let's not drag up the past." But the past doesn't need dragging. It lives right there beside you, breathing quietly. After dessert, Catherine poured me wine. Her tone softened, but her eyes didn't. "Mark told me you two met once," she said. "Hardly remembers." "He remembers," I said. "Just not the way you think." The smile froze. "Still dramatic, aren't you?" "Not dramatic, just honest." Her voice dropped low enough for only me to hear. "Mention Mosul again, and I'll make sure everyone knows why you were investigated." I met her gaze until the color drained from her face. "Maybe you should ask who wrote that anonymous letter," I said. She blinked but recovered, laughing as if I'd made a joke. I stepped out onto the terrace. The Virginia night was thick and still. Through the window, Mark stood near the bar, watching me, but not daring to move. His silence said everything. Later, in my room, my phone buzzed. One message: "Don't let them see who you really are." I traced the sender's IP. It led straight to Catherine Morgan and Associates. The storm the forecast promised was no longer out at sea. It had finally found land. Morning in Virginia arrived thick with jasmine, a sweetness that clung too long. I woke before anyone else, stepped out to the balcony, and lit a cigarette I hadn't touched in years. The smoke stung, sharp enough to remind me I still had nerves left to feel. The dress Catherine sent hung on the door, pale champagne silk with a note pinned to it. "Don't wear the uniform. It draws the wrong kind of attention." I left it untouched. I'd go as myself, not as the shadow she preferred. The rehearsal was held at the Chesapeake Grand, all chandeliers and glass, reflecting the bay's false calm. I sat in the last row, invisible but present. When name tags were handed out, mine read A. Morgan. No rank, no first name, just enough to exist without mattering. My mother glided over, flawless as ever. "You're still stubborn," she said softly, adjusting my collar. "Just get through today. It'll all be fine." "Fine for who?" I asked. "For the family," she replied. "We've all suffered enough." I looked at the rehearsed smiles around us. Endured wasn't the word I'd use. Then I heard my name, Mark. He walked with that half-step limp I'd recognize anywhere. 17 years, he said. "You owe me 17 years of silence." I answered. He nodded. "You saved me. But they never let me say it. And now you're marrying my sister." I didn't flinch. "Truth isn't fragile. You owe me honesty, not apology." Before he could answer, Catherine swept in, voice bright as glass breaking. "How nice! You two catching up?" Her eyes lingered between us. "Talking about Mosul again? Let's not ruin the mood." A gust of wind lifted the paper in her hand. It skidded to my feet. "Colonel Morgan under investigation for misconduct in Iraq." "You kept this?" I asked. "A reminder," she said, "that honor should know its limits." She walked away, leaving perfume and salt in her wake. Mark pulled a worn photo from his wallet. Me, covered in dust, dragging him from rubble. "I've had it since that night," he said quietly. "Catherine doesn't need to know." "Maybe not." I said, "But you do." As I left, he called after me. "I still owe you. Debts aren't meant to be carried." I said, "They're meant to be paid." That evening, my phone buzzed with a message. "Don't forget, the past still has teeth." The trace led straight to Catherine Morgan and Associates. I didn't need more proof of who I was dealing with. Before sunrise, I drove to Arlington. The rows of white markers were perfect, almost sterile. I knelt by my father's grave and laid down a small insignia. When in doubt, stand tall. He'd told me I had, and they'd called it defiance. I brushed rain from his name. I don't know what they're proving, I whispered. But I'm fighting again, this time against blood. You always choose battle over peace. My mother's voice behind me. She looked smaller, pride thinning. You shouldn't be here before the wedding, she said. He didn't invite me. I replied. Your father died chasing honor. She warned. You'll end up like him. No, I'm just walking the line he taught me. She laid flowers on the stone. Some truths, she murmured, are better unspoken. I kept you safe. I told your commander to discharge you quietly. I saved you. No, I said. You saved yourself, from shame. You couldn't stand the truth of what I did. Enough, she snapped. I've been silent 17 years. I said. Now you listen. Wind tore her flowers away. I caught one, set it back. I didn't come to reclaim the past. I came to bury it, with the lies that kept you comfortable. As I walked away, she called after me. Who's going to save you? No one, I said. I already did. Lightning split the horizon. The storm had finally reached shore. The morning of the wedding broke under gray clouds that pressed low over Chesapeake Bay. The air smelled of salt and rain, heavy enough to taste. From my hotel window, I watched rows of white chairs and a rose arch arranged with surgical perfection, beauty without warmth. On the chair beside me hung the dress Catherine sent the night before, with a note. If you love me, don't make a scene. I didn't answer. Instead, I slipped my old insignia inside my jacket pocket. No one would see it, but it reminded me who I still was beneath their silence. At the reception, golden light poured across the ballroom, soft enough to lie. My card read A. Morgan, table 14, tucked in the far corner near the service door. A perfect place to disappear. My mother appeared, pearls glinting, voice measured. Can you sit quietly? She said. I will, I told her, when there's something worth respecting. She sighed. Catherine needs this day. The family does. And me? I asked. You already have enough, Althea. She left before I could answer. Music began. Catherine appeared radiant beneath the chandeliers. Mark stiff beside her. A smile stretched too thin. Their vows sounded rehearsed. Applause followed like punctuation. During the toasts, Catherine lifted her glass, her grin polished to perfection. I'm so happy my sister could be here, she said. She once served in the military, but I think we can all agree uniforms suit her better than dresses. Laughter followed. I stayed still, sipping water. My mother added softly. She's finally learning humility. Mark's hand tightened around his glass. Catherine went on, voice cutting sharp. Let's toast the woman who taught us no one is untouchable. The laughter turned colder. A man behind me whispered, was she really a colonel? Another replied, heard she was under investigation. I rose to leave. Then the microphone screeched. From Catherine's phone came her own recorded voice. Don't let people see who she really is. Silence swallowed the room. She fumbled, stammering something about a joke, but no one laughed. Mark set down his glass and stepped into the center of the room. Under the light, he straightened, saluted. Ma'am, Colonel Althea Morgan, my commanding officer. Every camera froze. Mark's voice steadied. She saved me. She saved my unit. I'm alive because she broke orders to save lives. Veterans in the audience rose instinctively and saluted. Catherine backed away, her microphone falling. My mother's wine spilled across her dress like blood blooming in water. A guest filmed the moment, whispering, when the groom saluted the bride's sister, the real hero. I looked at Mark and nodded once. Not forgiveness, just closure. The celebration shattered. Catherine collapsed into whispers. Mark vanished, and I walked into the rain. The ballroom lights glowed gold against the dark water. I unpinned the insignia, held it until the metal cut into my palm, then let the storm take it. A young reporter approached, microphone trembling. Colonel Morgan, how do you feel being recognized at last? I turned toward the sea, like standing in thunder, hearing the truth for the first time. By morning, the video had gone viral. The salute that silenced a room played on every screen. My mother called, voice shaking. Don't talk to reporters. You know how they twist things. You're worried about image. I said, no, I'm protecting us. No, I said, just you. I hung up, and the silence after felt clean. That afternoon, Mark appeared at my door with a flash drive. Evidence, he said. The anonymous letter. It came from Catherine's computer. I already knew. He hesitated. What will you do? Speak, I said. The truth doesn't owe them silence anymore. That night, an email arrived from the Department of Defense. Invitation. Colonel Althea Morgan, REIT, to address the Military Ethics Council on honor and integrity in service. The sea roared outside. I closed my laptop and stood by the window. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. 3 days after the wedding, I woke to the phone buzzing so hard it rattled the nightstand. The world had already seen it. The salute that silenced a room. The video spread across every screen. Mark's salute, the frozen faces, the quiet that followed. Morning shows ran the headline in bold. Who is the real hero of the Morgan family? My mother's voice cracked when she called. Don't talk to the press, she pleaded. They'll dig up your past, I asked. Whose past are you afraid of, mine or yours? Don't mention the letter, she said. The family can't survive it. I almost smiled. What family? Mother. I don't live in that house anymore. I hung up. The quiet after felt clean, almost holy, but it burned going down. They had demanded silence for years. Now they were the ones choking on it. By noon, rain pounded the coast. Mark arrived drenched, clutching an envelope. You should see this, he said. Inside was a copy of the anonymous letter to the Department of Defense, accusing me of falsifying reports. The signature traced back to Catherine Morgan and Associates. He exhaled. I suspected it. But now I'm sure. She did it to protect your mother's pride. They called you a disgrace. They were wrong, I said. I just refused to kneel. His voice broke. That salute, I wasn't saving you. I was saving myself. I looked at him, and I didn't need saving anymore. After he left, the rain grew louder, on my desk. The envelope glowed faintly in the gray light, proof that silence had finally ended. That night, an email came from the U.S. Office of Military Ethics. Invitation. Colonel Althea Morgan, RET, to speak on honor and integrity in service. Washington, D.C., next week. Some battles, I thought. Never wait to be chosen. Silence had been my prison. Now it was my battleground. I flew to D.C. in silence. The last time I'd walked through those halls, my head was down, my name a whisper people avoided saying aloud. This time, I didn't flinch from the lights. I walked straight. The conference room was lined with oak panels, flags hanging from the ceiling, front rows filled with generals, officials, and senators. Cameras glared like searchlights. I stood behind the podium and looked at them, faces that had learned to hide their cracks too well. I took a slow breath and began. I once believed honor was something others gave you. I was wrong. Real honor can't be given. It must be kept. The room fell still. We build rules to protect soldiers from enemies abroad. I continued. But nothing protects them from betrayal at home. Those who are wounded by their own families don't die. They disappear. And when they fall silent, the truth disappears with them. I presented the proposal. The Valor Act, a federal protection for service members whose reputations or careers are destroyed by relatives, partners, or civilians with personal motives. Legal aid, counseling, the right to reclaim public honor. An older general rose. Why does this matter to you? He asked. I met his eyes. Because I was one of them. I survived, and I don't want anyone else to survive in silence. The sound of cameras clicked like gunfire. In the back row, I saw her, my mother. No pearls, no perfection, just gray wool and empty hands. When the session ended, she walked toward me, trembling. Her voice was barely more than a breath. Althea, I never knew how to protect you without erasing you, I said softly. I never needed protection. I just needed permission to exist. Her eyes filled, but I left before the tears could fall. I didn't want the truth turned into spectacle. The next day, Congress approved the Valor Act for national review. I didn't celebrate. I wrote one line in my journal instead. When truth finally has a place to stand, silence can rest at last. Autumn returned to Maine, bringing a sea as flat and cold as glass. I spent my mornings teaching a small training class for veterans, mostly women who had known betrayal in uniform. On the wall hung a whiteboard with a hand-painted line. "We don't erase the wounded. We train them to lead." They called me coach now, not colonel. I preferred it that way. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Mark. "I've left Washington. I'm sorry it's too late to change the past, but I'd like to work for your program. I owe you, not in debt, but in faith." I folded the note and placed it beside the old insignia in my drawer. Sunlight poured through the window, glinting off the tide as it crept higher. I walked to the rocks carrying the medal recently returned to me. The scratches caught the last red light. 17 years, I whispered. I carried this under someone else's name. Then I let it fall. The metal struck stone once, then vanished beneath the water. The wind tangled my hair. The waves pressed against my boots. For the first time, silence felt like choice. Honor, I thought, isn't a medal or a title. It's peace, the kind that stands tall even when no one's watching. Back home, Valor barked softly as I stepped inside. The radio hummed. "The Valor Act has received federal funding." I turned it off and smiled. The last sound was water, steady, calm, and finally, mine.